When I received the call from the bank that fall morning, I didn't imagine that my own son had tried to have me declared mentally incapacitated. He forged my late husband's signature on a power of attorney and attempted to close my bank accounts without my knowledge. At 78 years old, I drive my own car, manage my finances, and I perfectly remember the combination to my high school locker back in San Diego. But to Robert, I was just an inconvenient old woman standing in the way of his inheritance. What he didn't expect was that his own daughter would become my fiercest ally and that I would finally find my voice after decades of silence. But before I continue, make sure you're already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments. Where are you watching this video from? We love knowing how far our stories travel. My name is Eleanor Roberts. I am 78 years old, and for nearly my entire adult life, I lived in function of others. I raised my son Robert alone after my husband Richard passed away. I worked 2 jobs to keep our little hardware store running and saved every possible cent to ensure he had opportunities I never had. Our relationship always felt normal to me, a mother making sacrifices for her son, like so many others. The first time I noticed something strange was when Robert was 17. He asked for $200 to buy soccer cleats. Richard said no, so Robert came to me with those pleading brown eyes, talking about team spirit and appearances. I gave him the money, but I signed a check to remember the moment. It was the first of many. The years passed, and the checks continued for college at Boston University, for the rent on his first apartment, for his wedding, for the water heater when it broke, for therapy after job issues, for his first divorce, and then for other things, small at first, then larger, loans that were never repaid, emergency bills, requests that always came with elaborate stories and promises of repayment. I always yielded, always said yes. How could I not help my only son? Finally, Robert married Valerie, an elegant woman with expensive tastes and a smile that never reached her eyes. She treated me with a polite coldness, looking at my modest house in Queens, New York, my simple clothes, my frugal habits with thinly veiled disdain. When they visited, which became increasingly rare, it was always to ask for something. Money for an investment, for a trip to the beach, for my granddaughter Sophia's school. Every request came wrapped in concern. "Are you okay, Mum? You look tired. Are you managing to take care of the house alone?" I didn't notice the pattern, or maybe I just didn't want to see it. It was a common Tuesday morning that everything changed. The phone rang, and it was Michael, a young manager at the bank where I've held my account for more than 4 decades. "Mrs. Roberts," he said, his voice polite but strained. "Could you come down to the branch today? There's something we need to discuss in person." When I arrived, Michael led me to a small private room. His hands were trembling slightly when he placed a folder on the table between us. "Mrs. Roberts, we didn't process anything," he began, choosing his words carefully. "We were concerned about the paperwork, which is why I asked you to come in today." He opened the folder, and there it was. A power of attorney in my name, requesting the transfer of all my assets to a joint account managed by Robert. At the bottom of the document, the forged signature of my late husband, Richard, as a witness. Attached was a medical letter I had never seen, stating that I suffered from early-stage dementia and could no longer manage my own finances. The air grew heavy, difficult to breathe. I looked at that fake signature, so different from Richard's real handwriting, and something in me broke. Not into pieces, but like a dam, giving way after decades of pressure. "Do I need to sign something?" I asked calmly. Michael seemed surprised by my composure. "Ma'am, to cancel any access, revoke previous authorizations, block everything he might think he's entitled to." He opened a drawer, pulled out a folder of forms, and slid it across the table. I took the pen and signed every line with a steadier hand than I expected. When I finished, I looked out the window. Traffic flowed slowly outside, oblivious to the storm within me. "You don't have to go through this alone," Michael said softly. I smiled at him, not with bitterness, but with a strange tranquility that was beginning to envelop me. "I'm not alone. I have a granddaughter who brings me flowers on Tuesdays, and now I have your forms." I drove home in silence, the envelope with the forged documents weighing in my purse like proof of everything I had refused to see for so long. At home, I opened the drawer where I kept all the cancelled checks I had written to Robert over the years. I spread them out on the dining table and started adding up. The total made me nauseous. $412,680, nearly $500,000 over 20 years, not counting the grocery purchases, the birthday trips, the gas cards, my granddaughter's medical bills, when Robert couldn't include her on his health plan. As I looked at those papers, the phone rang. Robert's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Shortly after, I received a text. "Hi, Mom. Just checking in. Wanted to let you know I dropped off some paperwork at the bank last week. Just in case something happens, they can call you. Nothing major, just routine. Call me when you can." Routine, that's what he called it. Trying to take my money, my name, my rights. Routine. I took a deep breath and dialed another number. One I hadn't used in almost 5 years. My lawyer, Claire Perez. The last time we spoke was after Richard's passing. Claire speaking. "It's Eleanor Roberts," I said, my voice firm. "I need to change my will." She didn't ask why. She just said, "Come this afternoon. I'll clear my schedule." When I arrived at Claire's office, I told her everything without interruption. She listened intently, taking occasional notes. She raised an eyebrow when I mentioned the forged documents. "Do you want to press charges?" she asked. "No," I replied. "Not yet." She nodded. "But you want to revoke all previous powers of attorney and remove him from the will? And I want to set up a trust for my granddaughter, Sophia." Claire's pen stopped on the page. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. She's the only one who still calls me because she wants to, not because she needs something." We spent the next hour going over documents. I signed each one without hesitation. When I finished, I left the office. I stood on the sidewalk and looked at the sky. The air felt different, lighter, as if something fundamental had shifted. I took out my phone, scrolled to Robert's name, and blocked him. He could have had everything. Not my money, but my trust. Now he had neither. The silence after blocking your son's number isn't peace. It's something different. A low hum under the floor you hear when the refrigerator shuts off, when the faucet stops dripping, when the whole house takes a deep breath and realizes it's no longer waiting for anyone to come in. That night I couldn't sleep, not from nervousness, but from memories. I lay in bed with the lamp on, staring at the same crack in the ceiling Richard always promised to fix. Robert was my only son. I carried him through a winter so rigorous that our breath froze on the windows inside. I gave birth without anesthesia because the hospital in Detroit was full. I worked the cash register with my stitches still fresh, just to keep our store running. And he turned out smart, charming. One of those boys who would sell sand to a drowning man. I remember the first time he lied to me. A silly lie about a school field trip. I believed him because I wanted to believe. That's where it all started. He discovered it was easier to get a loan of my gullibility than actual money. The next morning, I made coffee and called the bank, not the branch, but the headquarters. I asked to speak to the fraud department. I was transferred to a man named John, who had a voice that sounded like he'd dealt with far bigger messes than mine. I'd like to report an attempt at financial fraud, I said. The person's name is Robert Roberts, my son. I could hear his breathing pause slightly after that. Mrs. Roberts, he said carefully, has a police report been filed yet? Not yet. I'm handling this privately for now. I understand. We can add a fraud alert to your profile, and I recommend you contact the credit bureaus as well. Would you like help with that? Yes, and I'd also like to create a restriction. No alteration to any account without my personal presence with photo ID. Not a note from someone claiming I forgot my own name. John agreed, kind and professional, without condescension. After that, I called the police, not to file a report yet, but to document the forgery. An officer named Brenda took the details efficiently. At one point, she asked, "Do you feel unsafe?" "No," I replied. "I just feel tired." It was noon when I hung up. I sat at the kitchen table and looked at the little notepad with the cumulative total Robert had received over the years. I flipped the page and wrote at the top, "Things I still have. A house without a mortgage in Queens. A car that runs. A garden full of tomatoes. A granddaughter who still calls me grandma and means it. My name, my account, my story." I stared at the last line the longest. My story, not his. Robert always told a version where I was the helpless mother who wouldn't have survived Richard's death without his guidance. He made himself the hero in settings where I wasn't present. I used to let it go. But now it mattered, because when someone tries to erase you, you better make sure that person isn't going to write your ending. I hadn't realized how long I had been silent until Sophia knocked on my door that evening. She always texted first, always called me grandma, with that firm voice, never syrupy, never fake. But this time, she just showed up. I heard her car park, that old hatchback with exhaust issues. When I opened the door, she was already climbing the steps to the porch with a shopping bag in her arms. "I brought soup," she said, holding it out like a peace offering. I stepped aside and let her in. The house still smelled faintly of coffee and the printer ink from the forms I had signed. Sophia didn't say anything until we reached the kitchen. She dropped the bag, took off her coat, and looked at me with the same eyes whose tears I used to wipe away when she scraped her knees at age 4. "Dad's freaking out," she said. "He called me 5 times today. He said you're confused, that you're overreacting, that you—" She paused. "Might be having a late onset episode, whatever that means." I stirred honey into my tea and set the spoon on the table with care. "He said that?" She nodded, biting her lip. "He told Aunt Lorraine you tried to close your own account and forgot halfway through the process, that the bank manager had to walk you out." "Could it be?" Sophia leaned forward. "Could that be true?" I looked her in the eye. "No." She let out a slow sigh and leaned back. "Good, because it didn't sound like you. And I told him so. I said if Grandma forgot something, it's because she's tired of remembering for everyone else." I smiled at that, not because it was funny, but because it was true. "I'm not losing my mind," I said, more to myself than to her. But I think I finally stopped losing my patience. Sophia reached across the table and took my hand. Hers was warm, slightly calloused from her job at the bookstore. She wasn't the type of girl who wore acrylic nails or posted selfies. She wore thrift store jackets and remembered birthdays without needing Facebook reminders. "Did he really try to close your account?" "He forged Richard's name," I said. "He filed a letter saying I have dementia. He tried to take everything." Sophia looked shattered. "But why? You always helped him." I picked up the notepad from the counter and flipped it to the second page. $412,680. Her eyes widened. Grandma, that's your entire life savings. I nodded, and it still wasn't enough. We were silent for a while. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the dry leaves on the sidewalk. A fall day, one of those that makes you feel the passage of time. Not sadly, but truly, as if nature never lies. "What are you going to do?" she finally asked. "I already did it," I replied. "He's blocked from my accounts. The banks flagged his name. The lawyers redrafted the will." "And me?" "You," I said, squeezing her hand. "You have a trust now. Not a fortune, but enough for school, for rent, for anything that gives you freedom." She gaped. "Grandma, I didn't come here to—" "I know," I interrupted gently. "That's why it's yours." She covered her face with her hands. I could see her shoulders shaking, not from greed or guilt, but from the recognition that someone had seen her, chosen her, believed in her. "You always had the key to this house," I said. "Now you have something more." Sophia lowered her hands and looked at me as if trying to memorize my face. "He's going to be furious." "I hope so," I said calmly. "Maybe fury is different enough from entitlement to wake him up." For the first time in a long time, I felt something like pride swell inside me. Not for what I had given, but for what I had finally taken back. My voice. The letter arrived 2 days later. Thick envelope, my name meticulously written on the front. No return address. I knew the handwriting of the enclosed note even before I opened it. Robert never learned to write cursive correctly. His R's always looked like incomplete B's. Inside, a 3-page letter folded with the kind of precision that tries to pass for sincerity. I sat at the kitchen table, unfolded it carefully, and began to read. "Dear Mum, I'm so sorry things have come to this. I think there's been a massive misunderstanding. I never meant to hurt you. The paperwork at the bank was just a precaution. You're getting older, and I was just trying to ensure everything was in order in case of an emergency. I didn't forge anything. I just filled out what the clerk told me to. Maybe someone else made a mistake." The audacity in every sentence hit me like a cold slap. A precaution. Using my deceased husband's name was a precaution. Lying to the bank about my mental health was an act of love. I continued reading. I realize now that perhaps I should have communicated more clearly. I've been under a lot of pressure lately. Work is unstable, and Sophia's tuition is a burden. I thought if I could manage things better, we would all be better off. I didn't want you to find out this way. I was trying to protect you. Please call me. I'm worried about you." Worried about me? The last line was the worst of all. "I hope you can forgive me. Let's sit down and talk as a family." I folded the letter slowly, then tore it in half, and then tore it several more times until the pieces were too small to hold meaning. I didn't need a family meeting. I needed the truth. That very day, the bank confirmed the final stage of the trust transfer. Claire called to say the paperwork was finalized, everything settled. Sophia would be officially notified within a week. "You did well," she said, "and you did it all correctly." I thanked her, hung up, and stared out the window for a long time. The maple tree in my yard had finally turned red. October always made things honest, stripped them down to what they really were underneath. That night, Sophia showed up again. This time she didn't call. She just texted from the car and said, "I'm outside. Bought groceries." She didn't mention the trust, didn't say a word about the money. We ended up making grilled cheese sandwiches. We ate in the kitchen with the window open and listened to the leaves scrape the sidewalk. Halfway through the meal, she said, "Dad is trying to make me feel guilty." I nodded. "He says I'm choosing sides." "Are you?" She looked at me, clear, unwavering. No, I'm choosing the truth. There's a difference. I reached out and touched her wrist. Perfect. Sophia was silent for a while. Then she said, "He's going to hate me." "No," I said. "He's going to blame you. That's different. Hate requires effort. He never worked that hard for anyone." She laughed, sharp but not bitter. "You're colder than I remember." "No," I said. "Just finally warm enough for myself." That night, after she left, I sat in the living room and picked up the photo album I hadn't opened in years. There we were, Richard, Robert, and I, in a different time. A time when love didn't have ledgers, when hugs weren't debts. I kept the album open beside me as I drifted off in the chair. I wanted to remember where we had started, so I would never forget how far I had come. The first call came at 7:42 in the morning the next day. I recognized the number. Not Robert's, but his wife's, Valerie's. We hadn't spoken in over a year. The last time was Easter, when she left a store-bought cake with a note saying, "We're busy. Love you." She'd barely made it up the steps. Her perfume lingered longer than she did. This time, she didn't wait for the voicemail. "Eleanor, hello?" she said, her voice breathless and fast. "I think we need to talk." I was still in my robe, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold. I walked to the window and looked out at the quiet street in Queens. "About what?" She sighed, the theatrical kind. "I don't want to get involved in whatever is going on between you and Robert, but you're making things very difficult." "I haven't made a single call," I said. "He's the one making the effort." She ignored me. "Sophia told us about the trust. Do you think it's fair to pit her against her father like this? She's just a kid." "She's 24, I said calmly. "Emotionally, a kid. She's not ready to handle that kind of financial responsibility, and it sends the wrong message." "What message do you prefer?" I asked. "That theft is a family value." There was a pause. "I know you're upset," Valerie said, her voice cold. "But this can still be resolved. Quietly. You don't have to involve lawyers. If you could just sit down with Robert," I interrupted. "I did sit down," I said. In my mind, I sat down with every version of him I'd ever known. The boy who cried when his goldfish died. The teenager who lied about failing chemistry. The man who asked me for money under the table because his pride couldn't handle a real job. And I decided that version was over. "You always had a flair for the dramatic." "No," I said. I finally stopped being afraid of the silence. She tried one more time. "He's your son. I know exactly what he is." I ended the call and placed the phone carefully on the table, as if it might burn the wood if I wasn't gentle. 10 minutes later, Robert called. And again. And again. I didn't answer. At 11 o'clock, I drove to the community center in Brooklyn. Not to participate in anything, just to sit. They had remodeled it a few years ago, adding tall windows and polished floors. Everything smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. I sat on a bench outside the library room and watched two ladies playing cards across the hall. One of them wore a sweatshirt that said, "Carefree since 53. I smiled involuntarily. After a while, a woman I didn't recognize sat next to me. Slender build, elegant coat, hands neatly folded in her lap. "Did you come for the estate planning workshop?" she asked. I shook my head. "Just visiting ghosts." She nodded slowly. "Me too." We didn't talk much after that, but it was nice. Not to be needed, not to be pleaded with or blamed, just to exist without purpose. On my way home, I stopped at the post office. My mailbox was mostly empty. A coupon flyer, a retirement investment ad, and a light blue envelope with no return address. Inside was a card, no message, just a photo of a little boy holding a Lego spaceship, a Polaroid from 1988. On the back, in my handwriting, Tommy's first big build, doesn't let anyone touch it. The card had been folded, crumpled, refolded. It had creases like an ancient letter someone couldn't bring themselves to throw away. I drove home with the card on the passenger seat, looking at it as if it could explain something, but it didn't explain. Robert had once built something with pieces he was proud of, and now, so many years later, he was trying to dismantle what wasn't his. But I wouldn't let him. Not anymore. Sunday arrived quietly, the kind of silence that used to mean something in this city. Church bells, slow coffee, neighbours in their yards, now just meant no calls from unknown numbers, and one less excuse to ignore the quiet. I took my tea out to the porch. The air had that cool edge that October brings when it wants to remember what's coming. I pulled my shawl tighter around my shoulders and watched the world slowly wake up. A runner, a squirrel, the neighbour boy dragging his garbage bin with a missing wheel. And then, a car I recognized. Robert's, not the rusty Corolla he used to drive. No. This was the newer model, sleek, grey, with the payment plan I probably financed. He didn't park. He just stood there. Then he got out, smoothed his jacket, and walked up the steps with that slow, practiced calm he used in meetings. The kind that said, "I've already decided how this conversation ends." I didn't move. He stopped about 2 feet from me, his hands in his coat pockets. "Mom, you're not returning my calls. No." He flinched, as if I had confirmed something. "I wanted to talk in person." I took a sip of my tea. "I know things were misinterpreted," he said. "You forged a letter." He gritted his teeth. "That's not how I would describe it." I raised my eyebrows. "I thought we had an agreement," he continued, "that I would help manage your affairs. You're not getting any younger, exactly." I looked at him, standing there like a man who thinks age is an argument. "Do you think I lived 78 years just to forget who I am?" "Mum, please don't make this harder than it already is." "No," I said calmly. "You already made it hard. I just got tired of pretending it wasn't." He shifted. The breeze tugged at his coat. "So this is it? You're cutting me off after everything I've done?" I looked at him for a long second. "What exactly did you do, Robert? Tell me one thing you did for me that wasn't a transaction." He opened his mouth. He closed it. "Sophia is the one who calls, the one who visits, the one who asks how I am without asking for anything in return. She's just a kid. She's twice the man you ever were." That hit him. Not like a slap, not even like cruelty, but like the truth, the kind that hurts because it fits. "I needed help," he said finally. "I didn't know how else to ask." "You didn't ask. You stole." We stood there for a moment longer, both wrapped in our own stubborn silence. Then he said, "People are going to talk." "Let them. She's going to regret it, you know," he added. "Sophia, when the money ruins her." I stood up. "Do you want me to believe she's going to fail because you would have?" Robert blinked. "I gave you more than money," I said. "I gave you time, shelter, forgiveness. You turned all of that into leverage and lost it." He looked at the ground. "So you're going to throw out your own son?" "No," I said. "You did that. I'm simply refusing to pick you back up." And with that, I turned and went inside. I didn't slam the door. I didn't lock it for drama. I just closed it slowly, deliberately. Behind me, The house cheered as if it had waited a long time for someone to finally do that. I didn't hear from him for a week. No calls, no letters, not even a guilt-laden knock on the door. The silence didn't feel like peace, not yet. It felt like the expectation of something, like the calm before a major election. But then the email arrived. The subject line was short: request for mediation. The sender, Valerie Roberts. She had written it like a business letter. Formal, punctuated, with capitalization where emotions once lived. Dear Eleanor, Robert and I believe it would be in everyone's best interest to have a mediated discussion. There are several misunderstandings and legal complications that need to be resolved before this situation becomes unnecessarily public or severe. We are willing to meet in a neutral location. If you agree, please reply with your availability. We hope to handle this with maturity and respect. I didn't reply, not because I lacked words, but because they no longer deserved mine. I printed the email, folded it in half, and placed it under the ceramic paperweight Richard gave me the year he forgot our anniversary. A little apology in the shape of a lighthouse. It used to seem romantic. Now it seemed more like a warning. 2 days later, a letter arrived from their lawyer. I opened it with steady hands, sitting at the dining table with my tea and the low hum of the radio behind me. The name on the letterhead was unknown, but the tone was quite familiar. Polite, laced with pressure, disguised as suggestion, but leveraged for money. Our clients, Mr. and Mrs. Roberts, believe that the recent alterations made to the estate planning documents were executed under emotional duress and without adequate legal counsel. We request a review of the decisions involving financial transfers and testamentary assignments, especially concerning the trust now in the name of Ms. Sophia Roberts. I read the entire letter and smiled, because desperation has a scent, and they were wearing it like cologne. I called Claire the next morning and told her what had arrived. She asked me to read the letter aloud. I read. She laughed halfway through. "Do you want me to respond?" she asked. "No," I said. "I want you to wait. Let's give them more rope." "Are you sure?" "I'm 78 years old. I've survived wars, loss, childbirth, a business collapse, and a husband who died on a Tuesday but left love behind like loan interest. I've survived worse than a letterhead." Claire laughed. "You know, you're kind of terrifying now." I should have calmed down sooner. Later that day, I called Sophia. She answered on the second ring. "Grandma, is everything okay?" "I received a letter," I said. There was a pause. "From them?" I nodded. Then I remembered she couldn't see me. "Yes, they want mediation." Valerie wrote first, then the lawyer. Sophia didn't say anything for a moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. "I can give it back, Grandma. The trust. If it's going to... No. But if they... No," I said again. "You're not going to give back what wasn't stolen. You didn't ask for it. I gave it to you. That matters. I don't want to make things worse." "You're not," I said. "You're the one who made things better." She let out a sigh that I could hear trembling slightly. "They'll probably come after you next," I added. "Guilt, threats, family dinners chud with silence and heavy looks. Just know that I trust you." "I won't back down," she said. "I promise." "I know." That night I sat in the living room with the lamp low and the letter beside me. I ran my fingers over the embossed name of their lawyer, a man who probably thought a 78-year-old woman with no formal education would tremble at an intimidating letter. He didn't know that I used to fix commercial plumbing valves with my own hands, that I could calculate compound interest faster than his interns, that I once saved our store from foreclosure by selling 50 lawnmowers in a single weekend because I promised every customer a homemade apple pie. I wasn't easily scared. Let them send letters. Let them call this war. I'd already been in battles where the enemy wore grief, not Gucci. This was a reckoning. The next escalation didn't come by mail. It came as a knock, a slow, deliberate rhythm, not friendly, not nervous, the kind of knock that means control. I didn't move at first. I was in the back room sorting winter sheets, but the knocks continued, patient and measured. When I opened the front door, Valerie was on my porch in a camel coat. Her hair was so tightly pulled back, it looked like a mask. She had a clipboard in her arms. Not a purse, not a bag, not even gloves, even though the morning was cold enough to sting. "Good morning, Eleanor," she said, as if this were normal. "It's not," I said, and I didn't invite her in. She didn't wait. She simply took a step forward as if my doorway were hers. I stood in the threshold, blocking the entrance. She adjusted the clipboard. "You didn't respond to any of our communications. I thought we could speak in person." "That's intentional." She smiled, polite and brittle. "I understand you're upset." "I'm not upset," I said. "I'm uninterested." She glanced inside the house behind me, as if looking for signs of unreasonableness. A mess, a forgotten stove, something she could use. "You made decisions that affect our entire family." "No," I said. "I made decisions that affect my money. You're not entitled to either." Valerie shifted her stance. I saw the tension in her jaw. Then, the cracks behind the courtesy. "You're making things difficult for Sophia. She's doing just fine. She's being manipulated. You always had a strange influence over her." I almost laughed. "You're confusing love with influence. Easy to do when you've never felt either." It was enough. Her eyes hardened. She held out the clipboard. "I'm here to make a final proposal. If you dissolve the trust and return the funds to a central family account, we will abandon all legal inquiries and handle everything discreetly. No damage to reputation, no unnecessary attention." I didn't take the clipboard. "Do you think I'm afraid of attention?" I asked. "I think you're not thinking clearly. This hurts everyone. This protects everyone from him." She took a deep breath. "He's your son." I nodded. "And you are his mirror." For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she completely abandoned the polite demeanor. "You're burning the bridge," she said dryly. "No," I replied. "You two set it on fire years ago. I just stopped pretending it was a pathway." She turned abruptly and walked down the steps, her heels clicking like accusations. The clipboard remained in her hands, unsigned. I stood in the doorway, watching her leave, the wind blowing her coat. Just before she reached the car, she turned around. "You taught Sophia to be cruel." I smiled. "No, I taught her not to inherit silence." And then I closed the door. This time, I locked it, not out of fear, but out of determination. Later that night, I found a voicemail from Sophia. "Grandma, did she stop by? I heard from Dad. He said something about one last olive branch. I'm worried. Are you okay?" I called her immediately. Her voice was tight when she answered. "I'm fine," I said gently, and she brought a clipboard, not an olive branch. "Did you sign anything?" "I don't sign lies." She was quiet. "Then I told them I wouldn't meet with them without you. They said you were unstable, that you manipulated the bank, the lawyer, me." I let that slide for a second. "And do you believe them?" "No," she said, but it still hurt to hear that from him. "I know." We were silent for a while. sitting in different houses with the same ache, the ache of realizing that family can disappoint more deeply than any stranger. Finally, she said, "I'm not giving it back. The trust. I don't care what they threaten." "I know," I whispered, and I believed her. Because Sophia, for all her youth, inherited something I almost forgot I needed to pass on. Not just money, but courage. I once read that strength isn't loud, it's silent, rooted, slow to bend. In that week, mine sounded like teacups delicately returning to their sources, like a phone that went unanswered, like paper sliding into a folder, one document at a time. No shouting, no retaliation, just silence, heavy, deliberate. But not everyone appreciated that kind of silence. 2 days after Valerie's visit, I received a message from a man named Peter Lane, a financial consultant, apparently for Robert and Valerie. He left a voicemail with a tone that sounded freshly printed. "Mrs. Roberts, I represent certain interests of your son and his wife. I'm contacting you to request clarification regarding recent asset transfers. We believe some of them may have occurred under emotional pressure, and there are concerns about your capacity to handle such significant decisions. If you're willing, we would like to help rebalance your estate to protect your legacy and family unity." Family unity. That was a new form of manipulation. I didn't return the call. Instead, I forwarded the voicemail to Claire. She responded in less than an hour. "Don't worry. They're fishing, but I will send a formal contact to them. It's time to put this on the record." Perfect. Let them talk to lawyers. Let them pay for every hour they try to distort the truth and turn it into doubt. I've already spent enough years subsidizing their plans. Now they could subsidize their own fantasies. Later that night, I baked a cake. Not for them, but for me. Banana bread. With the recipe Richard's mother gave me when we married, blurred in my handwriting, the ink fading where I'd spilled vanilla. It had been years since I'd baked without a special occasion. No birthday, no fundraiser, no obligation. Just because I wanted the house to smell warm again. Halfway through the baking, the doorbell rang. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it, but something told me it wasn't them. I opened the door and found Sophia. She was holding a stack of papers, her shoulders slumped, her eyes tired. "Am I interrupting?" "Only the bread," I said. "Come in." We sat in the kitchen, the oven humming behind us. She put the papers on the table, printouts, statements, emails. I didn't read. I just looked at her. "I think they're investigating," she said, "trying to dig up something about me." Valerie asked if I had already used the trust funds. I haven't used them. Not a dollar. But she said if I spend it on rent, they'll accuse me of misappropriation of assets. "They don't have access," I said. "They're trying," she whispered. "They're making calls, asking questions at my job. My advisor said they even contacted the university registrar's office. They're waiting for you to cave." Sophia looked down. "Part of me wants to cave just to make it stop." "No," I said. "You don't give cowards what they want." She nodded slowly, but I saw the weight in her spine, the way her fingers picked at the corner of the paper. "They don't see me as a person," she said. "Just a chess piece." "They don't see anyone as a person," I said. "Just means to an end." I got up and poured tea. She took hers with honey. She always had. I remembered the first time I gave her a cup like that. She was 8 years old and had a fever. I sat by her all night, reading old storybooks, until she finally fell asleep with her head in my lap. They had forgotten that girl existed. I hadn't, and I never would. When the banana bread was ready, we ate 2 slices each, warm. No plates, just napkins and hands. We didn't talk about money after that, or laws, or tactics. We only talked about books. What she was reading, what I planned to read, the ones Richard never returned to the library. When she left, she hugged me tight and whispered, "I'm proud of you." The words soaked into me like water into dry earth. After she was gone, I stood in the doorway for a long time, holding my shawl closed, watching the night. My son was somewhere out there, furious, arrogant, plotting. But inside here, there was only peace and banana bread. I thought they would back down, that after the lawyer's letter, after the silence, after the door Valerie walked away from, they would lose their breath, their nerve. But people like that don't back down. They changed tactics. The next call didn't come for me. It was for the church. Pastor Isabel called that afternoon, gentle as always. She's led our little congregation for almost 20 years in San Diego, always with hands that smelled like lemongrass and a voice that calmed the most rebellious child. "Eleanor," she said, "Robert asked about you. I told him we don't get involved in family disputes, but I thought you should know." He sounded concerned, she continued, cautiously. I almost laughed. "Concerned about my soul?" "Concerned about your failing health," she said softly. He wanted to know if she had noticed any signs. There it was, the slow drip of poison. They couldn't get my money through banks or lawyers. So now they would try through doubt, reputation, whispers in the corners of places where I used to be safe. "Thank you for letting me know," I said. Pastor Isabel paused. "Eleanor, I know you, and I know what strength looks like. If you need me to speak to anyone, the bishop, the board, I will." "That won't be necessary," I said. "Let them think." Later that week, at the Wednesday community lunch, I noticed. Some glances darted away quickly, two couples whispering by the coat rack. Mild, subtle things, but I know the shape of a story before it's told. Someone had started talking. I didn't hesitate. I put mashed potatoes on paper plates and asked Mrs. Mehra about her new hip as if nothing had changed, because nothing had changed. Let them think I'm frail. Let them circle like well-dressed vultures. They wouldn't find a feast here. That evening, after church, I received a text from Sophia. "They're telling people you're not well, that the trust was a mistake, that I coerced you." I replied simply, "I trust you. They don't matter." But I knew it mattered to her. Sophia always believed in justice, that the truth would win if you just said it loud enough. She didn't understand yet that some people only hear what's convenient for them. The next day, I decided to fight back. Not with letters, not with lawyers, not even with words. I called the local library in San Diego. "Hello," I said. "I'd like to reserve the community room next Wednesday evening for a reading." "A reading?" "Yes, a personal account. Family, finances, boundaries, a public reflection." The woman on the line hesitated. "Is this for a book club?" "No," I said. "It's for anyone who has ever been told they are too old to matter." She reserved the room. I made 20 flyers on my home printer, simple black and white. Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eleanor Roberts. A quiet, free recounting for all. I left 5 at the coffee shop, 2 at the florist. I handed one to Pastor Isabel. "Is this what I think it is?" she asked. I smiled. No vengeance, just the truth. Because I wasn't going to whisper. Not anymore. They tried to drown me in silence, use my age, my grief, my loneliness as a weapon. Let them come to that library next week. Let them sit in chairs and pretend not to fidget. I would tell my story, and this time they would have to listen. The folding chairs were already half occupied when I arrived. I was surprised. not just by the number of people, but by the types. Women from the church, a man from the hardware store I hadn't seen in a decade, two young women I didn't recognize holding notebooks in their laps. And in the back, near the exit, arms crossed and posture stiff, was Valerie. Not Robert. Of course not Robert. He had sent her, as always, as spokesperson, as shield, as mask. I walked to the front of the room with my notes in one hand and a thermos of tea in the other. I wasn't nervous. That feeling was long gone. At some point, between his first betrayal and my last forgiveness, this wasn't a performance. It was a declaration. Pastor Isabel sat in the front row. Sophia walked in quietly and sat beside her. I found her gaze and nodded once. She didn't smile. She looked serious, prepared. "Thank you all for coming," I began, standing behind the small podium. No microphone, no amplification, just me. My name is Eleanor Roberts. I've lived in this city since I was 21. I ran a hardware store with my husband, raised a son, paid my taxes, kept the kitchen clean, and buried more friends than I can count. I'm not sick. I'm not eccentric. I'm not frail. But I am tired of the silence, of the manipulation, of the way people treat older women like faded photographs, easy to ignore unless you need something sentimental. Some nodded. Someone sniffled in the second row. I came here tonight to tell a story. Mine, the one being distorted and whispered around this city in coffee shops and choirs. I came to set the record straight. I opened my notebook, but I didn't read it. I spoke from memory, from the gut. I told them about the forged document, about Robert going into a bank and trying to declare me incompetent, about the letter with Richard's dead name at the bottom, about the calls, the threats, the lawyer's insinuations that I had lost touch with reality. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I simply spoke the truth, line by line, like nails being driven into wood. I told them about the trust, how I had created it for Sophia, because she was the only one who came without asking, who stayed without obligation. And then I looked directly at Valerie. She told me I was destroying the family. But what do you call a family that's only held together by fear and obligation? Is that worth saving? Valerie didn't blink, but her fingers tightened on her purse. I'm not asking for pity. I'm not asking for applause. I just want the truth to live somewhere outside my body before it's too late. I took a deep breath. I know many of you have children, grandchildren. I know some of you have secrets, shame, maybe regret. Maybe you're sitting there thinking, I stood by for too long. I know that feeling. I looked around the room at the woman from the corner store who once lent me sugar, the man who ran the funeral home, Sophia, watching me like a lighthouse. Well, I said, this is me saying it's never too late. I took a step back. No bow, no flourish, just the silence of a room learning to listen again. Afterward, there was no applause, only something better. Silence. The kind of silence that doesn't need noise to prove it heard you. Then, one by one, people stood up. Some shook my hand. Others hugged me. Some just nodded, eyes glassy, lips tight. I didn't need words. I had enough of those tonight. Sophia came last. She didn't say anything. She just hugged me as if she were trying to hold together everything the world tried to destroy. And then she whispered, "You seemed taller tonight." I laughed. That's what happens when you stop carrying the shame. Behind her, Valerie was already gone, slipping out the side door like smoke, like guilt, trying to avoid the daylight. I didn't care. I let her run. I let her tell. I let them sulk in their rooms, filled with resentment and lack of control. I had done what I came to do, and that night, for the first time in a long time, I slept without dreaming of explanations. I woke up to roses, 3 pale yellow stems in a glass jar left on my porch with no note, no card, no signature. Just the flowers, placed delicately next to the door, like a gratitude that didn't need to be traced. I knew they were from someone who had been there, someone who had heard. Inside, the kettle whistled. I poured my tea. I sat near the window and watched the street breathe. A dog walker passed, a boy with a backpack too big for his body. Life, unaware that anything had changed. But it had changed. Not in the headlines, not in legal documents. In here. Later that morning, Sophia called. "They're quiet," she said. "Too quiet." She meant Robert and Valerie. I understood the concern. That stillness wasn't surrender. It was strategy. The tranquility of someone who thinks long-term, who doesn't mind waiting if they think you'll get tired. But I wasn't tired. Not anymore. "They know now," I said. "All of them. The city, the church, your boss, the bank. That story they were trying to invent now has a counterweight." Sophia sighed. "I keep getting calls from a number that leaves no voicemails." "Block it." "Yeah, but it feels like they're circling, waiting for something." "They're waiting for you to cave," I said. "So don't cave." There was a pause. "They're not used to hearing no. They're about to become fluent in it." I hung up and got dressed slowly. I was going to downtown San Diego, not to run errands, but to receive gifts. Sometimes just being seen matters. At the coffee shop, the owner, Miriam, offered me the tea on the house. She didn't say why, and I didn't ask. A silent solidarity settled between us. I sat near the window and read the newspaper, letting normalcy settle into my bones. Then Valerie walked in. No clipboard this time, no coat armor, just jeans, a sweater, and a face that looked sculpted from cold marble. She saw me, stopped, went straight to the counter, ordered her drink, waited, said nothing, but kept looking at me. "Blink," she warned. When she turned to leave, she stopped at my table. "What was the speech about?" she said. I didn't take my eyes off my newspaper. "The truth needs no adornment." "Did you turn this city into your jury?" "No," I said, folding the paper carefully. "I just stopped letting you write the testimony." She shifted. "Do you think any of this will matter when the lawyers get involved?" "It already matters. People believe me, and more importantly, I believe me." She tilted her head, studying me like a puzzle that used to be easy. "Were you always this theatrical?" "No," I said. "I was quiet. You simply confused that with agreement." She scoffed and took a step back. But before she left, I added, "You can keep circling, calling, making up stories, but I promise you, Valerie, when the dust settles, all you'll have is the echo of your own entitlement." She didn't answer. She left. And this time, the room wasn't watching me. It was watching her. Later, at home, I sat in the kitchen with the roses in front of me. I touched one of the petals, soft and stubborn in its shine. Then I opened the locked drawer where I kept my will. I added a note, not legal, just personal. To Sophia, in case you ever doubt your worth, know this: you didn't inherit money. You inherited proof that standing your ground is not the same as being unkind. With love, Grandma. I folded the note. I put it under the documents and closed the drawer. Let the others prepare lawsuits, whispers, strategies. I had a legacy, and they couldn't steal that. He came quietly, as most endings do. A letter, certified mail, with return receipt requested. my name written carefully, the envelope thick but weightless in meaning. The sender, Robert Robertshies, Perez and Associates. Claire called before I opened it. "It's not a lawsuit," she said. "It's a settlement offer." Of course it was. They tested the city. They tested me. They tested Sophia. They found no fault. So now they did what all arrogant people do when power slips through their fingers. They offer a deal that looks like mercy. I opened the letter with a butter knife and unfolded it on the kitchen table like a relic. To Eleanor Roberts. With the goal of preserving what remains of our family's dignity and avoiding further public embarrassment, we propose the following. You agree to dissolve the trust in Sophia's name and reinstate the previous financial distribution, as outlined in your 2019 estate plan. In exchange, we agree to cease all legal and reputational objections and refrain from any further action or contact. This is a one-time offer. Please consider the impact on your granddaughter and the long-term unity of our family. With all respect, Robert and Valerie Roberts. No lawyer's signature, just theirs. It wasn't legal strategy, just desperation in a suit. I read it twice, then once more, slower. Every phrase tried to bend to reason, to decency, but the lie was evident in every line. They weren't offering peace. They were offering silence. Mine. Sophia came that evening. I handed her the letter without comment. She read it, her eyes scanning quickly, her face unreadable. When she finished, she looked up. "Are you going to respond?" "Yes," I said. "I already responded." I showed her the envelope I had prepared. My answer: 2 handwritten lines, no letterhead, no legal phrases, no. My dignity was never yours to negotiate. Sophia exhaled slowly and smiled, a quiet, proud thing. "Can I mail it?" I nodded. She left 10 minutes later, envelope in hand, coat tightly closed against the wind. I stood at the window long after her car was gone. I let the stillness wrap around me like an old song, and I thought, not for the first time, about all I lost in this fight. Not the money, not the years, but the illusion. The idea that love and loyalty always come together. That if you give enough, explain enough, wait enough, people will become who you hoped they would be. They don't become. Sometimes they become louder versions of themselves. And sometimes the best thing you can do, the most loving thing, is not to chase, not to beg, not to teach, but to stop, affirm your feet in the truth, and let the others get lost. That night, I wrote one more letter. Not to Robert, not to Valerie, to myself. Eleanor, you waited too long to believe you were right. But now you believe. And that counts. Let the world call this stubbornness. You know this as survival. You know this as peace. Let this be enough. I put the letter at the bottom of my notebook and closed it carefully. Then I turned off the lights, locked the doors, and slept. No dreams, no ghosts, no noise, just sleep. The sun was rising through the lace curtains, soft and unhurried. October was waning, the gold giving way to grey, the kind of air that smells like endings. I got up slowly, no rush, no phone to check, no letter to expect. The mailbox had been empty for days. The silence now felt earned, like an aired-out room after years of stale air. Sophia showed up with cinnamon rolls, still warm in the box. We sat at the kitchen table as usual. The radio murmured old songs whose lyrics we both pretended not to know. "They went silent," she said between bites. "They'll stay that way," I replied. She nodded. "Dad unfriended me. Deleted old photos, too. I shrugged. Let him delete. We still have memory. She smiled, but it was a tired smile. Not the smile of a girl, that of a woman. The kind of smile that learned some people don't come back, and that isn't always a tragedy. I looked at her, and I truly saw her. She carried not just my blood, she carried my lesson. She didn't ask for power. She didn't demand an inheritance. But when she was offered the chance to show up, to take hold of the truth and stand firm, she did it without shaking, without apologizing. That is legacy. Not property, not assets, not names on deeds, but courage. Before leaving, she asked, "Do you regret anything?" I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. "No," I said, "but I regret waiting so long to stop apologizing." Sophia leaned down and kissed the top of my head. "I love you," she said. "I know," I replied. She walked out into the morning, a scent of cinnamon still in the air. I watched her go and felt something shift, not an ending, but an agreement, like dust finally choosing the floor. That afternoon, I wrote one last thing, just a short line on the last page of my notebook. May the silence you chose be the peace they never gave you. I closed the notebook and placed it in the top drawer along with the rest. The will, the trust, the documents they once tried to take from me. Everything is still here. Everything is still mine. I got up, made a cup of tea, and sat near the window. The maple in the yard had already lost most of its leaves. Only a few remained, but the ones that remained held on with sincerity, just like me. A year passed since that Wednesday at the library. Seasons changed, people came and went. Robert and Valerie moved to another state. I found out by chance through an acquaintance who saw them loading furniture onto a moving truck. I didn't ask where they were going. It didn't matter. Some distant city where they could start over, tell a different story about who they were. Sophia finished her master's degree and got a job at a publishing house in the next city over. She uses part of the trust to pay for a small, cozy apartment, and the rest remains intact, growing slowly, just as I intended. It's not a fortune, but it's enough to give her breathing room, to not have to say yes when she should say no. On Tuesdays, she still brings me flowers. Not because she has to, but because she wants to. My house remains the same, although I made a few changes. I painted the kitchen yellow, something Richard always promised to do but never had time for. I planted new orchids in the garden, bolder varieties that bloom in surprising colours. I started teaching a memoir class at the local library, where people of all ages come to share their stories. Claire called me last week to say the trust funds are secure, bulletproof against any future attempts at objection. "You won," she said, a smile audible in her voice. But I knew it wasn't about winning. It was about stopping the losing, stopping the giving away of pieces of myself with every check, every apology, every forced silence. Yesterday, I received a postcard, no return address, just my name and address, written with those R's that look like unfinished B's. On the back, just 2 words: "I'm sorry." I don't know if it was an act of genuine contrition or just another attempt at manipulation. It doesn't matter. I put the card in the same drawer where I keep the will, not as an invitation to reconciliation, but as a reminder that some words arrive too late to be answered, but perhaps too early to be completely discarded. This morning, as I drank my tea on the porch, I noticed the maple finally starting to bud again. Small green leaves, delicate against the branches that had seemed so bare and exposed during the winter. I am 79 years old now. I still drive my own car. I still manage my accounts. I still remember the combination to my school locker. I still carry the scars of my son's betrayal, but not as a burden, as a map. A map that showed me a different path. Not a path of blind forgiveness or unconditional love, but a path of self-love, of boundaries, of truth. Sometimes, in the quietest moments, I think about Richard, what he would say if he could see how everything unfolded. I imagine he would be proud, not because I defended the money he left, but because I finally learned to defend myself. And if there is one legacy I hope to leave, not just for Sophia, but for anyone who has heard my story, it is this. The silence you choose must be your own, not something imposed on you, not something you endure out of fear or guilt, but a peace you conquered. Because at 78 or 88 or 98 years old, you still own your story. You still decide where to put the periods. You still choose when to stay and when to say, enough, I deserve more. And I deserved more. Sophia deserved more. And maybe, somewhere in his hardened heart, Robert knew he also deserved more than what he became. Today, another page turns. Another season passes. The sun shines on my teacup, creating little rainbows in the white porcelain. Small beauties for those who still have eyes to see. At 79 years old, I am finally learning to live without apologizing for taking up space, without whispering when I should speak, without bending when I should stand tall. It's a lesson that came late, but not too late. It's never too late to find your voice. Now, if you enjoyed this story, click on this next video appearing on your screen, because in it, there's a story of betrayal and revolt like you've never seen before.